Can you see my PowerPoint, Gandhinaya?
Yes, go ahead, Ayya.
Okay, thank you. Arutperumjothi. The best kept secret in medicine is that the body can heal itself under the right conditions. This was said by a doctor. And when Vallalar Perumal is talking about us, he says there are 4 factors which destroys us. It's food, it's sex, it's sleep, and it's fear, in which 2 plays very important role, which is the food and the sex. So he also says that if we cannot avoid unnecessary, unwanted food, we are going to destroy our body soon. So avoiding unwanted, unnecessary food and consuming pure sattvic food to extend their life is the path of Sutha Sanmarga. Do you know that people typically lose almost like 1 centimeter every 10 years after the age of 40? And this height loss especially is even more rapid after the age of 70. That's when we see our grandparents or parents, you can see them slowly shrinking. So what's happening here is basically the issue, the aging actually happens on the bones and the joints and the muscles. These are all as per science, basically. And these lifestyle changes, what we actually adopt on a daily basis, the choices what we have can slow the process instead of proceeding it in the normal one, or instead of even speeding up to get to there. So it can help us to slow those process pretty good by staying physically active and eating actually good food, so that we can prevent like bone loss, which is another major thing which is happening right these times. If you remember the original pyramid, food pyramid, actually, for US, they released in 1992, and after that, more researchers showed that the USDA, US Department of Agriculture, food pyramid has been totally flawed. It provided misleading guidance, actually. It didn't have the right stuffs in the food pyramid. So in 2005, they basically have to go ahead and revise it in such a way that it provides new guidance to help the public, of course, to help them choose the right dietary choices. They added more physical activity, they added more grain, etc. But still, if you look, we don't know when they are going to change next though. So this thing keeps on going. But there is something which we can look towards, like evidence-based, right? What is the science is saying? Evidence-based nutrition. What is science is saying about this aspect of it? So in here, what I have is basically two snapshots, which is a public document available from the US National Library of Medicine, right? And it talks about the protein content, and this is another major thing, which everybody has their own view, and everybody's proceeding in a different direction too. So this is about protein content, and what it says is high protein content increases the mortality rate, right, in 65 and in older populations. So mortality rate is our death rate. So the death rate increases at that time. That's what the paper says. It's based on research and complete evidence. And what it tells is, when reading into it, eating animal protein increases what's called as a IGF growth hormone. The IGF basically helps us to grow from a small infant to the next stage, and from the next stage to the next stage, right? And then finally to an adult. So it just helps in our growth process. But after some years, what happens is it is not helping us that much, but it is increasing our tumors, which is causing the cancers, which is causing the risk of cancer. So that's what I'm saying. And note, these protein, what they have found are mostly from animals. The animal protein, it's a comparison between animal protein and the plant protein, the protein which is obtained from plant. So the research is based on 6,300 adults over the age of 50, and people who ate high protein diets. So with this experiment, when the result, what they obtained was 74% were most likely to die before even the end of the study, who was consuming high protein diets. So decreasing the protein consumption from moderate to low even reduced the mortality risk by 21%. And the team found that the plant-based proteins were not as detrimental to health as animal-based protein. Because there is another misconception that, you know, we needed animal-based protein, right? Animal-based, I mean, I'm talking about eggs, everything, and anything which comes from animals. So this is what the study says. And then they also recorded this IGF level, what I was saying, which is like a growth hormone, which helps us to grow. But the same thing, you know, takes care of growing the cancerous cell as well, you know, at that particular age. So what they have found there was also the IGF rate recorded was also highest level in animal proteins. They were 4 times most likely to die of cancer than low protein diets. And even what they are doing is they are comparing this with smokers and non-smokers. When you compare the rates, right, over the age of 65, people eating high protein food, that's equivalent to comparing somebody who is smoking. So that was the comparison. So when this result was published, there was one nutritionist said, oh, we really do not want to basically, you know, go over and do this comparison more, because smokers might think that, oh, you know what, then meat is same as that, so why should I quit? Right? So it would cause lots of confusion. So they said, okay, fine, you know, let's not get into that aspect of it. And there are a couple of key points which actually that document says, which I want to share with you. And it says almost everyone is going to have a cancer cell or a pre-cancer cell at some point of time. The question is, does it progress? So at some point of time, everybody is going to have this pre-cancer cell. This is what they're saying. It's benign cell at that point of time. It's not grown to that stage as cancerous growth. But what they are saying is, it turns out one of the major factors in determining if it does grow into that is dependent on the protein intake. It depends on the protein intake. So not only is excessive protein consumption linked to dramatic rise in cancer mortality, but middle-aged people who eat lots of protein from animal sources, including meat, milk, cheese are more susceptible to early death in general. So that was the second case, what they were presenting. So the third one, what they were, the important one, what they were presenting was, the researchers found that plant-based protein, such from beans, did not seem to have the same mortality effects as animal protein. So the rate of cancer and death also did not seem to be affected by controlling carbohydrates or fat consumption. So we could consume more carbohydrate and fat, and that looked like that did not have an impact on the cancer cells, basically suggesting that animal protein is the main culprit. And far interesting, I was looking at India to see what's happening up there. So the stats says there were 96 hospitals which has registered with the National Cancer Registry Program. So just 96 hospitals in the complete country. So from 2012 to 2019, there were 1.3 million registered cancer cases. So it's 1.3 million cancer cases, out of which 52% was reported as a male, and then 47% as female. So it's more or less catching up or coming close. So there's nothing nothing there. And it's interesting to see most of them were from tobacco too. The percentage rate of the split between what kind of cancer they were having. So it starts the most of them from tobacco, and then to the rest, whatever you can think of, all parts of the body is how it's getting distributed, right? So that's what's so that's what actually is happening at this point of time, right? But you would have heard about all these new movements which is happening, like veganism and all those new things. I totally agree that there are too much things going on with kind of diet, like this diet, that diet, right? Too much diet, and what to follow and what not to follow. It actually causes confusion. Yes, I do believe that, with totally different names and all those things. But I was thinking the same thing too. When looking into vegan or veganism, or the people who are basically championing that, one thing I noted that was it was championed by doctors in here for the most part. It was them who were championing those effort in there because they started seeing differences in food. They started seeing like, oh, you know what? With medicine, food also plays a major important role in there. So they started seeing those things. So that is why they are championing some of these efforts excuse in this process. So, and these most troubling health issues have a surprise solution. And this surprise solution, as said by them, is nothing but the food. Issues like weight, diabetes, thyroid are all related with the food, what we are consuming, what we are taking in. Because the food actually, what we are consuming in is what basically changes what's referred to as hormones or surapigal. So those hormones make us feel great, and they can also make us feel terrible. We feel sometimes sad, sometimes happy. Those things are all driven by these hormones. Sometimes miserable, but sometimes pain-free, so relaxed. That can only be observed when coming from a misery. So when coming from a misery, that's when we say, oh, a normal one is so great. That's when we realized the blessing of how to be a normal one, right? How to lead a normal, how to have a normal body with no pain. So these hormones are controlled by the food, what you eat, and the choices which has been made on the food. They are like our music conductors in orchestra. They can slow it down, the music, increase the tempo of the beat. They can play however different into our body, however it wants. That's why the recent advancements in medical hormonal therapies are also, lots of medicines are there with hormonal therapy. Lots of researchers are going into it as well. They turn the metabolism upside down, the moods, and how body stores fat, and also more serious issues like cancer, prostate, which happens on men, ovarian, which happens on women, are also caused by it too, all caused by hormones. So they are produced by the glands in the thyroid, or the where the Raja Urupukal, as they say it, as the major parts. Those parts produce those hormones, and these hormones get into our bloodstream, and it gets into the various tissues of the body. It sends signals to those tissues to tell them what they are supposed to do. If they send a wrong signal, wrong thing happens. When the glands produce right amount of hormones, things are good. Diseases develop when they are not produced right, or when too much is produced. And this affects our life. This affects our life terribly. So these hormones play a very important role in what we are doing, right? In what we are eating, what we are selecting, what choice we are making day to day. So there are multiple hormones. We don't have to know about all those things. I'm sure most of them is aware of insulin because of all these diabetes issues. There are hormones like estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, male hormone, female hormone, cortisol, growth hormones, happy hormones, whatever it is. One thing to know, one thing which was interesting when going over this is found that eating more dairy, right? Because we perceive dairy in a totally different level. Talking about milk in here specifically, and in some other countries, milk and cheese, or milk, cheese, whatever is being, taken from the milk products. So during this research, I want to say that they did also found that because we drink milk because of calcium, right? But it is found that due to that, we have not reduced fractures or improved bone health from all these dairy products. So that is what actually is found. And it also kind of leans towards this decision, saying that even harms are even possible with the increased intake. It really doesn't provide substantial benefit, but it looks like it does provide benefit when we are smaller, when a child, but once after the grown-up stage, it really doesn't provide benefit at all when reading through those papers. But Vallalar Perumal, refers to betel leaves having betel nut, and then calcium, chunamb, and Perumal says consume it 3 times a day, in the morning, in the afternoon, and also at night. And there are certain proportions for it. Having more betel nut in the morning, and then having more calcium in the afternoon, and also like more betel leaves in the evening, and a little bit less chunambu and betel nut in the night. And then there is a process and procedure for it. You have to actually remove the twigs in both the ends. And then the first liquid coming out of it can be, that needs to be spitted out. And then after that, the rest of them can be consumed. And the final tipi, or what they say, is the final extract that should be spitted out too. So this is what has been consumed actually in ancient times too. The things started going wrong when we started using it with multiple flavors, and all these bidas and prawn prags, I think pan prag or whatever came after that. Things started getting a bad names, right? But the way we were adopting before was good, was perfectly fine. So one other thing which I want to actually share from this book, which is written by a doctor called Your Body in Balance, right? It was written by a doctor. He also did multiple researches. He's not the author of the research which I've been pointing to. He's a different author who basically was championing like with vegan, right? Like how I was telling. And he was saying he has a separate topic just on milk only, links with milk. He says a surprising body of evidence has linked dairy products with prostate cancer. So they find evidences between dairy products and prostate cancer. Because what they were doing before was they were comparing United States with Northern Europe, right? Because they consume lots of milk and dairy compared with Japan, Thailand, China. And these countries are also westernized now too. So basically we cannot compare it, and because their prostate cancer rates are also climbing. So they did an analysis, and they say like 2 large Harvard studies investigated the connection and found that milk drinking men are much more likely to develop prostate cancer compared with men who generally steer clear of dairy products. This is the conclusion of the Harvard studies. And note that it was done with 20,885 men. So they did the study with 20,000 plus people, and they found that 43% has a higher risk when consuming dairy products. That's what he says. And then he goes on to say, like, do you know why this happens? Does milk have hormone in it? Yes, of course it does. It comes from cow who is busily making hormones, especially estrogens. That gets into her milk and become concentrated as milk is turned into cheese, because we consume lots of cheese in here. But for prostate cancer, the real problem is something else. When you drink milk, your body produces a compound called insulin-like growth factor. This is the IGF, which I was saying. And everyone has some IGF in their blood naturally, especially during the childhood and adolescence. As the name suggests, it helps you growth. In fact, if you don't want too much IGF-1 in your blood as an adult, because just as it causes children to grow into adults, it also causes cancer cells to grow into tumors. So that's actually what they have found in this research. So multiple researches and evidences, point to it. But here one might think like, oh, is it happening in my milk, right? Because the milk, what's out of the research, valid question. Out of the research coming in from here, it might be totally different than what you are consuming. That's true, totally agreed. Because milk has 2 kinds of protein, A1 protein and A2 protein. So this one doesn't get specifically into what kind of milk it is they have been consuming and such like that. But as a comparison, what this A2 milk protein does is that is what has been consumed before in India, which is coming from the desi cows, right? Which been like the traditional old cows, which just gives you 1 liter or liter and a half of milk, which is enough for just a family, not for everybody, right? So that is why all these different kind of varieties of Jersey cow and all these things came into the picture now. So that is something to think about. But I just want you to, be aware that these things are happening. But at the same time, this essence of book can be completely summarized. I can completely summarize just in 2 sentences. It says, number 1, it deals with all types of cancer. That's what this book deals with, and food, and how the hormones are getting balanced with each kind of cancer. So in summary, I can say the first one it says is avoid animal product, go for plant-based food. That's what it says. And then second one is try to avoid oil as much as possible. Just cut your fat in. That's it. That's what it says. And even it says a little bit less weight on the physical activity, which will also help too. So, if you want to have 3 points, those are the top 3, what they are saying in. And I was going over like, this brings another question. Why are we not educating, everybody around this? That's a very good question. Because there are lots of gaps in education. We think about it. The people who are doing medical degrees coming out in here, we are being taught like, oh, what's happening inside the body? How do we fix it? How do we troubleshoot it and stuff? But what's the impact on food in the body is an active area of research and study. Right now, evidence-based research and nutritional-based analysis are slowly being a part of a curriculum. And slowly, it's being learned. But it's going to take time from at least, what I can see, those knowledges and, and those researchers are going to take time. And it's up to one to wait how long they can wait, to find all those evidences. One thing I can say, it might be late. With that, actually, want to jump into the food recommendation, what Vallalar has said. So now we had seen, like, from science perspective, what's happening, how some people, some doctors or some researchers are saying about food and the impact of food in it. And there's a convergence factor in here. It's converging, but, the lines are not parallel. It's slowly converging, it's slowly divert. It's slowly changing its path. But when it's going to meet, we don't know. So now let's talk about what Vallalar has said, right, about food. And Perumal is saying, you got to take care of the body. That's the most important thing one has to do in their life. And that has to be the top priority of a person. Even though, sometimes, these days priorities changes for us, but this is something Perumal recommends. It's pure sattvic food is what Perumal refers. And this diet has intimate connection with our mind. It's formed of the subtlest portion of food. According to Vedas, Upanishads, any ancient, you look into it. By purity of food, actually, one gets the better thought too. His thought process basically changes. The inner nature changes. But at the same time, when making drastic changes, it's definitely not something recommended. Changes always have to be in a gradual manner when coming to food, right? So it actually lasts for a long time that way. And a sattvic diet is a pure vegetarian diet, which includes fresh vegetables, whole grains, pulses, honey, herbs. And person consuming sattvic diet said actually he'd be calm, peaceful, serene, full of energy, enthusiasm. His health is better because the food is the one which promotes both purity and mind also has impact on food, which is another different topic. In particularly, sattvic diet is intended to cultivate calmness, clear and compassionate mind. So with that being said, Permanar says that, oh, you know what, go for unrotten food. Unrotten food like jaggery, not to chakkarai, like honey, rock sugar, which is kalkande, right? Ayachanduram and Tamirapaspam ancient are ancient techniques. What they used to do is it's a method of converting herbs mixed with metals to make it consumable, to make it in a powder-like form. So they eat a very small portion of it. So it's a different technique what they've been using. So, but anyway, this is what Permanar is referring, is unrotten food, food that doesn't get rotted outside. You know, you keep it outside, it lasts for a while. But you know, the biggest challenge here is, are we getting even the right food? You know, that's always going to be there. Eating the right food itself is a big thing, but you know, trying to choose each and every food is going to be complicated too, because there are always going to be adulterations. Is this the does this have the right quality? So we got to think through all those things, because just if you look for our top honey brands, right, what we have, what has been exported, most of them is adulterated. When the laboratory, when the what's it called, CSE laboratory or a laboratory was checking, they found adulteration in lots of honey these days. So and then lots of countries are using antibiotics actually to help the bees, so you know they do not lie, they last for a long time. But what happens, those antibiotics get into the honey what they are collecting, and the honey eventually comes to us. So there are lots of problems with all these things. The problems continues still, right? Even though you know that, oh, these are the things I have to do, the second question is, oh, is it even having the right quality? I mean, even eating the right food, something like that, right? So that one we got to be definitely aware of. And with vegetables, Permanar says raw banana is good. Note that raw banana has what's called as prebiotic, which helps in the gut. Our gut, you know, for easier digestion. Ridge gourd, snake gourd, broad beans, winter melon, drumsticks. Most of them are like a wine kind of food. Drumstick is murga, which most people would use. Winter melon is vella pusinikai, brinjal, and then the purple fruited eggplant is the one from Thoothuvalai. From the spinach varieties, Permanar says, oh, go for Karisalai, Thoothuvalai, Munnai, Pasalai, drumstick leaves, all these things. You know, I have the scientific name with it too, in case if you're interested. Feel free to take a snapshot of that. So these are the kind of foods which Permanar is recommending. But he also gives advice on like, oh, how do you even consume it? How best we can consume those kind of food so it is better for us, right? So he also gives more tips, and it is quite detailed actually. You know, we can just keep talking it for hours and hours. Permanar says, like, do not delay when you are hungry. Feed the body, right? Don't starve your body for a long time. Don't prolong your starvation. So don't do that. At the same time, do not eat when you are not hungry. So when you're not hungry, you're not supposed to eat. So this actually also goes against with some of our typical rules which we follow in our home, right? Including me, is, you know, eating at the right time. So we try to get up from it slowly, and you know, due to like going office and things like that, it might be challenging that too. But the recommendation is not to eat unless we are hungry. So when eating, do not hurry up or don't be very slow in it. So maintain a pace at the time of eating, right? Chew your food properly and eat it, but you know, but don't keep on like chewing it for hours and hours, or you know, or don't be in a hurry. So if you do both of those things, you know, things are not good. So you can see there is a moderation here. So in Vallalar, you can see like a moderation. That's the Samarasam. You can see that Samarasam across everywhere. And even Perumal says, eating less than what we normally eat is good. That's good enough. Eat a little bit less than what we have to eat. Right. So these are some of the normal general principles Perumal is saying, which we can follow on a day-to-day basis. And then he goes into specific, like what you can eat, what you want to avoid, what you want to stay away from it, what you can eat once in a while, kind of thing. Perumal is also even recommending a rice, is a Jiraga Samba rice. So Jiraga Samba rice, which is perfectly cooked, meaning like not too liquidy, and it becomes like payasam or ghee, or like not too like stern, where where it is almost like a rice, right? So it needs to be perfectly cooked, is what Perumal says. And he says like when cooking water, actually stain the remaining water too. So this is I think what our grandparents were used to do before, and that's not possible using pressure cooker or electric cooker, but that's what Perumal is saying, because I think that has the fat content in it, and removing the fat content, right? That's what we are trying to do in here. Oh, and then one important point about Jiraga Sampa is the glycemic index, right? Low GI food. So this is also another famous thing going is low. This is low GI food, and the glycemic index is basically like the sugar getting into our blood. So we consume food. So some kind of sucrose, it has some kind of sugar gets into the blood, depending on the food. Some food actually has to spike up our sugar level more, some people less. And it is said in general, with regards to rice, people say that, or even from the medical field, they say, this is out of research, they say basmati rice, right? Basmati rice has low glycemic index. And Jiraga Samba too. Jiraga Samba is also pretty much on the same scale. I think they have exactly 50 glycemic index, pretty much on the same level. So it's also good for diabetes, right? That's the main problem with the low glycemic index. So drink hot water, and don't drink a lot. So Perumal recommends to also drink hot water. And there is also even a process for drinking this hot water too. So basically, sukkur, or the dried ginger, has to be taken. The dried ginger has to be, you have to apply calcium on top of a dried ginger, and then show it in fire. So what happens is basically it becomes black, right? You don't want to burn it out at the same time, and then shave off all those excess black, and then finally what would be remaining is just the white portion of it, and then make it as a powder, and then use that powder in the boiling water. And then what you have to do is, like, if you take 5 liters of water, you basically boil 3 liters out of it, where you have only remaining 2 liters. So that is actually what Perumal is recommending to do it. And Perumal also says that the water actually has 3 compounds in it. And the outer 2 compounds are basically eliminated by boiling it. And that is the reason given by Perumal. And then he says like, oh, you know what? If you cannot do this, at least drink hot water. Right? That's what he says. Oh, he'd say, oh, these are all the recommendations, and this is a process to get all these things there, but at least follow this, right? That's how normally he will say. Avoid all kinds of root except karunai kilangai, right? So I forgot to mention the scientific can't recall it either. But so this root actually is also given or given as medicine, right? Or is under their subscriptions, under medicinal subscriptions in Siddha medicines for constipations. So for constipation related stuff, they have this Karunai Legium. And I think it also comes in tablet and other forms too. And then Perumal recommends banana types such as Rastali, Payan, Bangala. These are the types of banana which he recommends. And he says, avoid consuming old food. So don't consume old food. Try to always eat fresh food as possible, because food becomes stale and it starts losing its nutrition value, and something might get in, bacteria could get formed in, lots of things can happen, right, when things get old. So that's the reason. Avoid fried food. And then he says, like, he gives a list of fried food too. So avoid these kind of fried food, and say, like, okay, once in a while, have a little. He says, he knows about us. He says, you know what, it's going to be tough. So yeah, this have it, but once in a while, but just take a little one. So now you can see, like, what science is saying, and there are lots of correlations in here with what we are talking about too. Add more cumin and peppercorns. All right, cumin and peppercorns, siragam and peppercorn, which is the milagu, right? Kuru milagu. So add those things a lot in all kind of food. It's good for health. That's what Perumal is saying. Okay, so reduce salt intake if you have to prolong your bodies. That's what it's directly said there. I'm not changing anything in there. So Perumal recommends the less we take salt, our body will last long. So that's what it's been said. And I think that's what the medical also agrees now. Reduce tamarind and chili as much as possible too. This can be done too. Tamarind, we can reduce, we can substitute it with, lemon. You can use it. And for chili, you can use peppercorns. So you can definitely reduce it, or, do some kind of substitutions. So things, try to consume as less as possible. And, at some point of time, hopefully we can avoid it. So when sauteing, use less cow ghee, and when not available, use sesame oil. So when sauteing, right, thali. So when sauteing, which we do in lots of our food, use less cow ghee. And when cow ghee, this cow ghee is referred to as the cow ghee from Desi, which is the Natu cow, right? Which is the one which is roaming out, which has a hump in the back, and the ancient cows you're talking about. So get it from it and use it, or not possible, get sesame oil, right? As what say. And then with oil, always I think unrefined, cold pressed is the best thing. Unrefined meaning it doesn't go through multiple refinery process. The refining process of oil could be anything. Multiple ways to do it. There are chemical process, there are bleach process, there is this process. If somebody says refining, then the next question should be like, what kind of refining? It gets complicated there. So avoid total refining, which is not good, and also cold pressed is the first pressed. So first time they press it, whatever comes it, they get it. That's cold pressed. So use onions, garlic sparingly. Use it once in a while, because they are used for lots of medicinal purposes. Don't want to have lots of medicine intake every time. So that's the reason why it's said. Use lentils such as tur dal. Perumal recommends to use tur dal, as it has lots of proteins and all the stuff which really is needed for a plant, vitamins, amino acids, and all those things. What is really needed for the body. Perumal says dinner should be less compared with daytime food. So when we are eating dinner, it should always be less comparative with our food, what we consume in daytime, because we eat food and then with very less activity we go ahead and we go and sleep, and that basically takes a toll on it because it doesn't get digested. And if there is no enough time, it's again a problem too. So but Perumal says, like, have dinner and then do some kind of small walking here and there. Ulavi very well. So he says to wander up here and there and then go to bed too. And then the comparative quantity, you have to eat a little bit less compared with the food what you consume in your afternoon. Avoid curd and greens at night. So this is because of the fact that greens will be tough to digest at night, and also curd is it. Perumal always recommends food which gives heat to the body, and curd actually cools down the body at night. So that's why Perumal is saying not to have curd at night, and then consume hot food only. So this goes hand on hand with the old food. So we don't want to eat old food. At the same time, we try to cook and then eat only hot food, right? Oops, sorry. So let me so yeah, so with this actually we can wrap it up, because I want to give a little bit more time if in case if we want to talk about anything, or if you have questions in mind, then because this is always something which lots of people have some ideas on, right? Or you have some concerns on, or you want to know more about it. I'll try to do my best to answer it. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening, and Arutperumjothi. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thanks, Ayya. Ayya,